Welcome to Women's Sacred Conversations. These conversations are sacred because they resonate with the energy of wisdom, inspiration, and self-empowerment from the perspective of feminine divine qualities. So what are these feminine divine qualities? Many of you listening know the answer to that. But if you're new and still figuring those things out, a few of them are love, compassion, collaboration, kindness, caring, connectedness. They're very beautiful attributes. And I believe that in these times, as in all times, we are called to activate those qualities and bring them forward. We are women having sacred conversations, ones that are revered and spiritual and holy and are to be honored. And they're also fun. I describe them this way because the conversations we have together, they uplift us, they educate us, and they let us know that we're not alone. Have you ever had that time in your life on your journey where you felt like, gosh, I feel so alone in all of this? Well, you don't have to feel that anymore. We are together on a journey of wholeness and happiness, constantly evolving and expanding our consciousness. Think about that. That's really nice to be expanding our consciousness together. So all people are welcome to listen in and learn on this podcast, yet we will stay primarily focused on the voices and perspectives of women. So all people are very welcome to listen in, and yet we keep our focus on the voices and perspectives of women. I'm your host, Dawn Morningstar, fellow journeyer reaching into and living from the dimensions of the higher self in all the ways I know how. I'm a master coach, author, and founder of Venerable Women, which is a sisterhood, a philosophy, and a movement. Venerable means worthy of honor, love, and respect by virtue of wisdom and experience. All people are venerable and worthy at their core, and every single one of us is being called to awaken the venerability within ourselves and to acknowledge it in one another. Venerable Women emboldens women to change the world by bringing our wisdom to life. Does that describe you? Are you dedicated to changing our world for the better, and you know that you have the wisdom that will be helpful to that end? That's who Venerable Women are. We are awakening and sharing our gifts in new and profound ways. Venerable Women are learning to claim the idea of our own venerability and worth after 10,000 years of patriarchy, which simply means masculine rule. And we are committed to honoring the venerability in all people and really coming together in a spirit of love. In this podcast, we are going to have a sacred conversation with the amazing Marita Rahlenbeck. Get ready, everybody. So, by the way, just so you don't have to worry, there will be links to everything that Marita and I talk about, and they will be in the show notes, which accompany this podcast. All you need to do is when you click on the podcast, you'll see the show notes right there. And you can click on those live links and get right into anything that Marita mentions or that I mentioned that you'd like to do a little further investigation of. So this is a... and also, this would really mean a lot to me. If you would subscribe to our monthly podcast, and if you like it, give us a 5-star rating and a review. That's how others on the path similar to ours can find us. It's a really sweet way to connect with other people. And so without any further delay, it is my joy and my honor to introduce to you our special guest, Marita Rahlenbeck. Let me tell you a little bit about her before I welcome her further. So Marita has a natural way of bringing the sacred into everyday life. Think about that for a moment. Marita calls it sacred mundanity. And so I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about that when we get into the interview. Her holistic approach involves supporting the body and the spirit, thereby helping women feel fantastic, giving them hope, confidence, and a feeling of empowerment, all while weaving in a healthy serving of, you guessed it, grace. Welcome, Marita.
Thank you, Dawn. That was just delightful.
I am so glad we are having this sacred conversation.
Well, I have to say, first of all, I was very honored that you made the invitation for me to join you. And then when I saw that you called them sacred conversations, I'm like, oh, well, of course.
No accident there, right?
I did. It was just like a score.
Definitely, most definitely. Well, and that's the thing. I think you and I have both seen over the years that when we're paying attention, all of those magic miracles and synchronicities are right there, right?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Yes.
Yeah. It's just a matter of uncovering them and paying it to, well, yeah, I guess uncovering them sometimes and paying attention to them when they're there.
Well, and also the element of when we align ourselves fully, they just drop in.
Yes.
I was having a conversation with my guidance this morning, and that's what it really was about, is that the synchronicities that I've experienced the last few weeks has been like, you can't imagine. I couldn't have imagined the kinds of opportunities that have come to me. And it's a result of being in alignment and total, like, non-attachment.
Yes. Yes.
And allowing things to just drop.
Alignment. Oh, excuse me. I thought you were finished with your
thought. Yes, that's fine.
Okay. So when you say alignment, we hear a lot about that. What does that mean to you? When you say alignment, what are you talking about?
I think what I'm talking about when I speak of alignment is that the trajectory of your being and your work and your faith and all of that is in alignment. And it's not something, I think what I have learned is that we all seek that, but it's not a recipe. It's not do this and this and this and then you'll have that. It's just this, when you follow that flow and all of a sudden you find yourself in this place, what kind of analogy can I give you? Like when you're, for instance, if you're someone who goes to the beach, which I am, mm-hmm. and you want to ride the waves, have you ever done that?
Oh, yes. I grew up on the East Coast. Yes.
Yeah. So the times that you don't quite make it, right? You get slapped. But the times that you actually jump at the right moment and you get that wave, you get that flow, that's kind of like, that's a visual for those of you the listeners who do that. Surfers, I can't speak that language, but the same concept.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You got to hit it right. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that was easy. And look how far I got.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And that is one of the feminine divine qualities too, is living in the flow. And in order to live in the flow, we have to be paying attention to where that flow is, right?
Yes.
And so I love that analogy because you're right. I have gotten knocked over by waves many times over the years when I wasn't paying attention and was not in the flow.
Right.
But in the flow, it is such a glorious feeling to really, it feels like you're floating on those waves. And
absolutely.
It's really quite lovely. And I think that that's what we're being called to do. And that is an element of grace. But before we get into that, I talked earlier in the podcast about the meaning of the word venerable, and I like to bring that up in this podcast for the obvious reasons. It's called venerable. Venerable is not a word that's used a whole lot, well, until I brought it on the scene back in 2013. But it really does, it means worthy of honor, love, and respect by virtue of wisdom and experience. And it also has elements of holiness and being honorable and really seeing ourselves in that way. What is your connection point with our Venerable Women Sisterhood? Just for those who are listening and really don't know anything about any of this, what's your connection point with the Venerable Women Sisterhood?
Well, the first answer is you. And the second answer is the women that I have met as a result of being in the room with you and the sisterhood, right?
Yes.
But the whole, taking it further to someone who, may not know you somewhere in the world, is that that holiness that you bring into a space. Like I told you that when I first held your book and just, I can't even say it without, that's how powerful it is.
Thank you.
The holiness in this book. You don't even have to read it. I mean, I'm not saying don't read it, but I'm saying that for me, just having it in my space, it emanates an energy that I want to be around.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing that in the book. My book is Venerable Women, Transform Ourselves, Transform the World. And Marita, you're not the only person who's told me that. I have had several people say that they haven't even read my book. They just put it like on their altar, or they have it on their website and they hold it. Now, obviously, thousands of people have read my book. But I think that this is the reason for that is that it's the essence of the book. It's the energy of the book, because we're telling the story, we're telling women's stories and acknowledging the venerability in women in that book. And I think that that's a hunger that many of us have had for a long time. I think that's what people pick up on.
Yeah.
And that's why. So thank you for saying that. And this idea of venerability, how do you know when you have activated your most venerable self and are living from that place? Because I do have a lot of people say, well, how do you get there, and how do you do it, and and how do you know that you're in that place when you are? Like, what's your answer to that?
There's a couple things I want to say. The first is going back to the whole discussion of flow.
Mm-hmm.
And the second has to do also what came up in meditation today is that the things that we choose to surround ourselves with, not the mundane things, right? But the types of the types of books I choose to have in my environment, the types of perhaps crystals or essential oils, what they all do is they hold a space for transformation. They hold a space to unlock a door, unlock the lock. They hold a space to crack the door open so that light can come in, which implies transformation. And I feel that that's all part of the answer to your question.
Yes. Yes. That's beautiful. So I also want to really give you the open sky space to talk about, like, what's your shout it from the mountaintop news right now that's going on in your life?
Well, my biggest news is, and my most exciting news, and where I have learned to shelve the how, is the release of my book, Living with Grace. The subtitle is A Story of Love and Healing, Leaving Paw Prints on the Heart.
Oh, love that.
And even before it was published, the transformation that I heard about from the early readers to help me with endorsements and things like that is just, I was, and I still am, so amazed at the power of the story of grace.
Beautiful. That is so beautiful. So you wrote and published a book. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's a big deal. You know,
It
it's
is a big deal. I had no idea it was such a big deal.
We never do until we complete it,
Lord.
right?
Yes.
It's such a beautiful experience. And I really want to go deeper into, you know, why you chose that title. And, you know, also, I guess before we even get to that, did you always know that you wanted to write a book?
No.
Okay.
I'd been told there's a book in me. In fact, I believe there's a book in everybody.
I do.
It's just a matter of accessing the content and
Yes.
getting it out, right? No, I had no idea. And yeah, especially if someone hadn't believed in the story, like my publisher, the book wouldn't be here. At least not yet.
Mm-hmm. It started with you believing in the story, though, right? Before even your editor.
Well, I knew the story had value. I couldn't see how the story of my cat named Grace could add value to my business. I couldn't see beyond the cat to the Grace.
Got it.
And what I love about the title Living with Grace is what are you talking about?
Yes.
Once you know that it's a cat's name, and that's the beauty, is the whole book weaves the wisdom of the cat, who is now, in my opinion, she is an ascended master in terms of master teacher, right?
Yes.
It's not just her story. It is how she, as a being, lived and died into grace. She died and lived into her name. It's just like, wow. So
that's beautiful. So she died and lived into her name, Grace. How did you choose her name originally?
I chose her name when I heard her story. So she was a rescue cat. I wanted a kitten. She was pregnant with 4 kittens. And I heard her story. They named her Mama Kitty, which was very painful.
Yeah.
And her story is that she was hit by what they thought a car, but I believe it to be a truck. She was hit on the side of the road. A woman drove by and had compassion, looked in the rearview mirror. Grace raised her head, and she went back and got her. Took her to the vet, did all of the whatever, did all that necessary stuff, and got her to a foster mama. But when I heard that story, I didn't have a picture of her for a very long time.
Oh.
I just heard Grace. She was saved by grace. I mean, the probability, right? The probability of her raising her head as injured as she was.
Yes.
And it was
the
winter.
Woman seeing it in her rear view mirror.
And going back. And I don't know. I don't know who this woman is. I don't know who paid the vet bills. I don't know how that all went down. But that's her story. And that's why it was like, no, she's not a mom. Yeah, she's a Mama Kitty, but she's not Mama Kitty.
That's not all she is.
She is Grace.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. So, getting back to this idea of writing a book, what did that process do for you as you were writing it? Because I know several people who are writing books right now, and actually I'm coaching a few people on writing their books. I'm curious to know, though, what your process was in writing the book. What did you discover? What did writing the book do that was different than like everyday life thinking about things?
Well, I'm going to answer the question how I think you're asking it. So the book was written in three different facets. So when she was really sick, and then the aftermath of her death, I wrote in a journal every day for as long as until it was complete. And it started then once she transitioned, it was total channeling.
Okay.
And so that I had all this content, and I literally gave it to my editor and said, here, I need you to put it in order. I'm too emotionally attached to this.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then in the book, there's a whole section called The Journey to Grace, kind of like the stages of grief. Not that it's linear, but our brains need a way to assimilate the information.
Yes.
That was actually written via pacing and dictating.
When you say pacing, you mean like pacing on the floor?
Literally holding my phone, recording, and walking back and forth and letting it download. Again, it was channeled.
Got it.
And the content, it wasn't really changed because it didn't need to be changed. I mean, maybe grammar, because we speak differently than we read,
right.
Correct?
Absolutely.
So, and then the third way that it was written was I had an animal communicator, and we spent an afternoon together where I recorded the dialogue between she and I and Grace. And then that found its way into the book. Mm-hmm. And this entire process, and then I think the second way of answering your question is, I am working with Grace. I am working with this master teacher. I am working with the state of grace. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It cannot but change you at your core.
Yes.
It cannot change you. It cannot not change you very deeply. So I believe that answers what you asked, correct?
Yes, absolutely it does. And I'm going to take us down a little different path for a moment, because I think it's important for people to understand all of the terms that you and I use and others use. Okay. So for example, you mentioned when Grace transitioned. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by transitioned? For the person who doesn't, most people say when she died. Why do you say, or what causes you to say transitioned?
I think that's so great. I think I use, I don't honestly know if I've used that word before. A lot of people, and we explore this in the book, we are sheltered from death. Mm-hmm. So, for me to say my cat died has you felt it in your body, right? You felt how that felt. When I say she transitioned, it's a different feeling. Mm-hmm. So it's the same when, a human dies, their soul exits their body, and they become free of their vehicle, which is their body. Mm-hmm. And the same happened with Grace. Mm-hmm. She transitioned from this broken body into a being of wholeness. And you mentioned wholeness.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting because I heard someone use that term many, many years ago about mm-hmm. someone who had passed away or passed on or died or however. And she said transitioned. And I have used that term pretty much ever since. Occasionally, he died just because then people know exactly what I'm talking about. It can be an economy of words sometimes. But I like that idea of transition because death really is not final. We don't know what death is really, but it does appear that something else happens. We don't know what that is exactly, but it is an interesting way to think about these different phases of, mm-hmm. Our spiritual selves. Many people say that we are spiritual beings having a human experience and so on. And so thank you for going there with me, because I want to make sure that everyone who's listening has the same understanding of what we are talking about.
Yeah.
I think that's an empowering way to be. And mm-hmm. then I also want to go down the path of channeling, because that's another thing that has really gotten a bad rap. It becomes really scary to some people, this idea of channeling, like it's for certain people. And I've even had people say, oh, you have to be careful of that, demons and devils or dark energies can come in. So I really do want to go there, because many of us, as we are awakening, we are trusting that voice that we're hearing. And we can call it channeling, we can call it inspiration, we can call it a number of different things. But I wondered, what do you feel about that whole idea of channeling? Like, do you believe it's for anyone to do? Do you think it's for certain people? Like, what are your thoughts on channeling?
I've never thought about that. So let me kind of be with that for a moment.
Sure.
I think that we all have spiritual gifts, and it's a matter of us seeing them or experiencing them, claiming them, owning them, honing the gift, right?
Mm-hmm.
Practicing.
Yes.
If you would have told me a year ago I was a channel, I would have looked at you like, what? Not that I doubted channeling, but me? But it was so clear that when I wrote, it was grace coming through my hand. The words are not my words. The way that she spoke was not the way that I speak.
Yes.
That kind of a thing. Is it for everybody? And like, is everybody a channel? I have no idea.
Right.
I honestly have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Can something bad, evil, whatever come through? Probably.
That could happen in any circumstance, though, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a matter of, discernment, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So does that kind of answer your question?
It totally does. And thank you for going there with me. I know this was not in what we had talked about in regards to questions. And yet I do, I'm thinking of my sisters and brothers out there who listen, and, you and I are used to a lot of this vocabulary, as are many of the people that we have in our circles. And I feel like one way to empower people is to make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about. So
yeah,
thank you for going down that path.
You're
So
welcome.
now I want to go back to your book. You felt all through the years that everyone has a book inside of them. You didn't necessarily know that this particular experience would turn into a book. You sought help from your editor. I love that you brought that up, because many times we might have this big thing that we want to do, and it can feel overwhelming to us. Like, I could totally feel your energy when you said you had all this writing, and it's like, I don't know what to do with this, and it's filled with emotion, and it's all this, and yet what you did was you took it to a professional who would know what to do with that. And I think that's really good for anyone to hear, is we don't have to have all the parts figured out, right?
Yes,
You had a great story, inspiration, all of that, but you didn't necessarily know how to arrange that, or put that together in a way that would make for good reading.
Right.
Beautiful.
And my editor was brilliant, and she was such a delight to work with. And
a good editor makes all the difference. That's one of the things in my when I'm coaching people as they're writing their books, I really make clear to them, because I have had people say, oh, my cousin Martha, worked for the University of Minnesota, and she knows how to edit. It's not the same thing. It's not about the grammar. It's about the way the book is organized. And that really does take a professional skill that an editor has.
Right.
So that made a big difference in my book as well. So that's helpful for anyone who is contemplating writing a book. And it also will let people know that your book, Living with Grace, has that professional edge to it as well. So I think it makes the journey for the reader a lot better when it's done.
Oh, I have read books that haven't been edited, and it's painful. It's so painful.
I know.
Like, dude, why has this not been edited? I don't understand.
Right. So, the thing that's sad about that is that there can be a phenomenal message, but if it's not, really laid out in a way that's graceful and lovely, then the message can be missed. And that's sad for everyone involved, the author and for the readers. So
Yes.
I'm really glad that you took that step. Now, and in fairness, I need to let our listeners know, I have not read your book yet because I was out of town and just haven't gotten it yet, but I do plan to read it right away. What are 3 inspirations that I will get from the book and that readers can get?
Well, I think that the story of Grace the cat is is number 1. Grace introduces a concept she calls it the tapestry.
Ooh.
And it's, the tapestry is how everyone that we meet brings a thread, and it's woven into our own tapestry. And we in turn bring threads to others. And it can be the person who's taking your money at the grocery store, right? And it can be someone that you are in relationship with on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. We all have something to contribute to each other's tapestry. I love that notion. It's not my idea. And I think just going through the stages of the journey to grace will show you how okay each stage is and how necessary each stage is in your life, because each stage has a gift.
Yes. Because otherwise it can be possible for us to say, oh, this stage or this thing is air quotes bad, and this one is air quotes good. But what I'm hearing you say is that all of these threads and pieces become the tapestry, and it's all necessary, right?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. And what else? I do want to talk a little bit about the idea that there are so many dear friends of mine who are cat lovers, so many. And obviously you are, many of my dear friends are. What is it about pets? I have a dog. Her name is Pika, and she's right here sitting by the fireplace. And what is it about pets that is kind of surprising to us? In other words, some people can just say, oh, it's just a dog or it's just a cat.
Yeah.
What is it about these beings that you would like to share from your perspective, especially since you received the information that you did from your pet who had made her transition?
Well, the story that came to my mind is, so when I was a girl, we always wanted pets and we always didn't get pets. My dad just didn't want animals in the house. And he was visiting one time. My parents moved to Florida. He was visiting after Mom died, and I had 2 cats at the time. And I remember him sitting in his chair the way that the stoic German will sit, right? And with his hands clasped at his belly, and he looked at the cat and said, "They really do provide." What did he say? It was all in German.
Are you translating?
I am. And the word's not coming. Like the companionship. They really are engaging. That's the kind of thing that he was saying. They're not just an animal. They have their personality and they interact with you at a level that humans don't.
Yes.
And the unconditional acceptance, like my daughter was married, and when she out of state, and so I was gone for, I don't know, 10 days or something, and was the longest I'd ever been away from Aria. So Grace had a kitten, I got Aria, right? And it was the longest I'd ever been away. And oh my God, she was glued to me for 3 days after I got back. And then my daughter and her husband, they went to Australia. They were gone for over 2 weeks. The same thing happened with them. Their dogs were just like don't leave, don't leave. Like, literally on top of them, and they're not small dogs. So there's something about that, you know, that I missed you, the love that they give you no matter what. I just,
Yes.
the companionship, the acceptance, the love, the mirroring.
Mm-hmm.
They can
And
mirror you.
Yeah, it's so unconditional too, is what I find. And
Yes.
I love the idea of being witnessed by these sentient beings. I mean, I feel, and they're so good at knowing our emotions and our thoughts. And it's like they're always paying attention. They're always paying attention at a level that, you know, many times escapes humans. So
I gotta tell you the story. So I had a Smokey Bear. He was a naughty kitty.
A naughty kitty.
Oh God, he was a naughty boy. But all this testosterone, I couldn't deal with it. But through an animal communicator, he said to her, "She's always on that little device." And the phone.
Oh my!
I had a landline at the time. I work at home, you know. So
oh my gosh!
he wanted more attention than I gave him, apparently.
And he was acting out because he wasn't getting it, right?
That's right.
Oh my gosh! That's
Oh God.
funny. Well, your book is "Living with Grace: A Story of Love and Healing, Leaving Paw Prints on the Heart."
Yes.
And so I'll say this web address quickly and the book site, and then remember that all of this will be in the show notes. Marita Rahlenbeck's web address is harmonichwholeness.com. That's harmonichwholeness.com. And her book site is livingwithgracethebook.com. livingwithgracethebook.com. So I look so forward to reading your book and seeing you in person to give you a big hug now that it's out there in the world. And where can people purchase your book?
Oh gosh, it's available at a lot of the online retailers. If you go to that web address, there's at the bottom there's links right to the store, right to the store.
Oh,
Amazon.
beautiful.
Barnes and Noble, BAM. There's a local shop in my area that wanted the logo on the site. Absolutely
Beautiful.
And go to your bookstore and ask for it. That way, other people can enjoy it that are in the store. So
beautiful, beautiful. Well, it has been an honor and a privilege to have this conversation with you. This certainly has been a sacred conversation, and I am grateful from my heart. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for being in the world as a venerable woman. And thank you for saying yes to this interview.
Oh, thank you for offering it, Dawn, very much. Thank you, and you're welcome.
Beautiful. So to close out our show for today, this episode, I wanted to thank our sponsor, which is the Venerable Women Organization and the Venerable Women Empowerment Foundation. A little bit about Venerable Women. It's a sisterhood, a philosophy, and a movement for women who are really changing the world by bringing their wisdom to life. You can learn more about it by reading my book, Venerable Women, Transform Ourselves, Transform the World, or you can just buy it and have it in your house, as some people have done. You can also listen to it on audible.com. The 12 Venerable Attitudes, known as the V-Attitudes, are a foundation of inspiration, a how-to so that we can gracefully and communally integrate into wholeness. The Venerable Women Empowerment Foundation supports women leaving prison to claim their worth and dignity and be part of the Dalai Lama's prediction that the world will be saved by the Western woman. The world will be saved by all people, certainly, and we want to make sure that we really support those who are longing to come up and live higher in their lives, to live at a higher frequency, a higher energy, because as we know, when we are happy, joyful, prosperous, and whole, we bring more of that into the world. So the other thing that we do with our foundation is we provide bras, underwear, toiletries, coaching, and leadership to women leaving sex trafficking, leaving prison, overcoming addiction, and leaving domestic violence or escaping from domestic violence. So in sisterhood, we trust our intuition, we make bold, inspired choices, and we take action to bring our wisdom to life so that we are manifesting a kind and loving world together. Thank you so much for transforming the world by transforming yourself. We will see you in our next podcast, and in the meantime, stay venerable.